We are live. I'm Naijha Wright Brown, co-owner of the Land of Kush Vegan Soap Bistro in Baltimore and executive director of the Black Veg Society. I am your host, also contributing for your Unchained TV. Who wants to learn about buying vintage and recycled clothing? Here to educate us is Kierrah Smith. Kierrah, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to see you too, cuz you know how it is. This is
Right.
how we gotta meet up. Yes, Kierrah is my cousin, y'all. But hey, we doing this interview thing. Kierrah, talk to us about your passion for style, beauty, and photography. Like what made you get into all of that?
That is so funny because it was really like a several paths of like reckonings and realizations that kind of got me to like finding my mediums of self-expression. So photography was like the first like artistic medium that I did, and I did it because I was in between jobs. To be totally honest, I was waiting on clearances for one of my first jobs, and I was like, I need to make some money. And so I picked up my camera that I had. I had a DSLR, and it was frustrating and challenging, but I kept going at it, and it allowed me to open the doors for myself and challenge myself to think more creatively and artistically. And I think that around that time, that's when I also started accepting, like, hey, I've always loved clothes. Like, I've always loved style. I never call it fashion because I feel like the word fashion intimidates me because I think of like people that study fashion and stuff, and I don't do that. So I speak about style. I speak about my own personal taste and how I see things and how things make sense for me. And so it all just kind of circled back around, and I've been able to like harvest on these really great skills.
I like that. I like that you said style opposed to fashion, because here I'm 50 years old and I can't even figure. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing whatever. So you didn't did you go to school for photography and all that? Because you said you didn't go to school. This is just something you got into, because you were looking for work. How long has that been? How long have you been in this creative mode and passion of doing this?
That's an interesting question. I have an interesting answer for it. So the thing is that I did not go to university for this. I went to university for political science.
Woo!
Yeah. But I think that stems from these tropes that I grew up with, this idea that school was not for me to do creative things, right? School was for me to develop things that were professional. At least that's the messaging that I felt like I was receiving for like the first 21 years of my life. And so when I made the decision to go to school, it was to follow in the footsteps of people that I had seen and follow the footsteps of things that I had known. And for when it came to creativity, I always known people to have hobbies, but I didn't know it really critically to know it as a career path or something to pursue, especially when you go into a school as expensive as mine. It's kind of hard to like make an argument for that, or it felt like that at that time. So I think that when people ask me about my creativity, I don't know about it having any type of educational catalyst in the traditional sense. I think what happened with me was like a reckoning, an unlearning, and an acceptance that we're all creative beings, right? And it's just the means in which we tap into that creativity, and that comes out through a multitude of different avenues for anybody. And so this was just kind of the way that mine started unfolding. And I, to this day, I like pick and choose at titles because at the end of the day, I'm just like, I just want to do what I want. Like I just want to do what makes me happy.
Can we get some snaps for that? I love it. I love it. I love it. And yeah, when you talked about the school and, unlearning things and the fact pushing you to, that whole professional corporate mindset, and you really sat back and looked at, I want to be creative. And I love it because that's what I'm doing with my daughter now. Like, your creative self is lost sometimes in school and corporate, and we need to bring that back. So I'm glad that you recognize that early. So let's talk about the reasons for your purchasing vintage and recycled clothing. Like, people used to look a certain way or look down upon that, but it is like a major trend right now. And I'm also learning it's eco-friendly, which, hey, educate us on about that. Why are you choosing to do this?
I was a fast fashion girl for so many years through like my early adult years. And I respect where they come from, where the industry comes from. But at the same time, it got to a point where I think I was hitting a wall, because as a consumer, you have to consider like my age and my access. So I'm only beginning to step into a time of access where I can afford to buy like higher end retail. But for years, I was only buying fast fashion, and then I was tired of it. So I was like, why do I keep doing this when there's things for Forever 21 I could pick up in the consignment shop? So then I started frequenting consignment shops. And then I started getting bold, and I was like, I think I'm trendy and stylish enough to dress myself in thrifted clothes. I think that I have a little bit of sewing capability. I have a little bit of a creative vision. I think that I can go into a Goodwill and fleek a couple of outfits. Like I really believed I could do that. And that's what I set out to do. And it's a challenge for me because when I walk into fast fashion stores, I'm bored, right? Like I'm like, okay, this is stuff that's kind of cute now, and it's going to go out of style really fast. But when you think of the cycle of a garment piece, right? Like a lot of those fast fashion clothing items end up right back in the Goodwill, like maybe one season later, if not the same season, right? So if I'm only looking for fast fashion, I could easily find it in a Goodwill. But if I'm also looking for unique statement pieces or things that I don't have to worry about running into somebody else at a party, and which has happened to me, I know that I can rely on just the time and effort that it takes to peel through clothing that has been worn but loved and find something valuable again. And I think it matters because I think that we should be challenged in this day and age, especially with the state of the climate and just the way that businesses operate, to reckon with the fact that so many clothes end up in the landfill, right? Like so many of the things that we purchase end up right back in the landfill. And if we're just repeating styles and we're repeating trends, then I think it could benefit us all to look at thrifting specifically, not just consignment and vintage, but thrifting specifically as a valuable consumer, a valuable way to build your closet and your wardrobe.
I love it. So if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Kierrah Smith, who is a photographer and a beautiful, lovely stylist. We're going to get into some other stuff that Kierrah does, but she's talking to us about why she's interested in purchasing recycled and vintage clothing. And I'm learning about the eco-friendliness of it. I was looking at a blog earlier yesterday and learned some of the things about vintage clothing not requiring new resources or energy. They tend to be higher quality, which means they'll last longer. You save something from going to the landfill when you recycle clothing, and you'll support sustainable fashion or styling, So this is all things that I'm learning as well, because I used to buy it for my daughter when she was young. And I've purchased a couple of pieces myself. What are your thoughts about purchasing this way, being eco-friendly? Have you, discovered that? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, to me, that is like one of the main reasons to do it. I think that when I consider the labor practices of the retail industry, and considered the volume of garments that, as I mentioned before, go directly to the landfill or end up back in the landfill just to fulfill really short-lived trends, I think it makes all the more sense. There are so many gems that's already in existence in the world, right? That we don't have to use a new energy source to get to. That's sitting somewhere in your own backyard, right? Because there's so many times that people are just looking to get rid of clothes. And I think that the thing about thrifting and sustainable clothing and sharing is that like it doesn't have to be limited to like actual retailers, right? Like I consider sourcing from a multitude of sources, right? So I consider sourcing from my friends' closets. Like sometimes I go like, let me shop through your closet. Like,
nice.
let me see what you have that you might not necessarily want. Because maybe I don't have to go out and buy something new for this event, right? Maybe I can just go to you. And I think that's a sustainable mindset, right? Because it's micro decisions as well as macro decisions. I feel like it's the macro decisions on the end of the corporations, right? And like how we proceed knowing what we're doing to the environment. But I do think there are micro decisions that make a difference every single day. And I think that those decisions could be made in the smallest of ways. So if I'm choosing to source something from a thrift store or a consignment shop or a vintage store, there is energy being saved. There's shipping energy being saved. There's labor being saved. There's the actual product, the cotton, all of these things are being saved with just the purchase of something that's already in existence. And it's also appreciation for community in there and sharing and giving and knowing that things are cyclable, right? So maybe if I take care of my garment, it could look good on somebody else in the future instead of it being mine forever.
I love it. And you have some comments coming in here now. Tom, thanks for tuning in. He basically sharing with us. Keep in mind, Jane Fonda says she isn't buying any new clothes. That is so major. See, I'm going to be getting into all of this stuff. This is vintage and recyclable clothing. So you're going to have to share some tips on beauty and styling with vintage and recycled clothing and accessories, because accessories are important too. A lot of times I find I throw something on and like, I don't like it. But then when I just add this piece to it, now it's popping. Can you share some tips with us? And is it sometimes expensive, or how can we keep it cost effective and inexpensive?
That's a really good question. And so I'll start there just because that's the more technical side, where when it comes to like thrifting, and it's like if you have the confidence and know that you have an idea of what you're looking for, then my advice is just to go for it, right? Like the thing about thrifting is it's about time, right? It's like a nice connecting activity where you're really just flipping through racks of clothing. And some of the methods that I use when I'm in the thrift store is I come in like with ideas about like colors, patterns, and fabrics, right? So you don't want to kind of get lost because you're going to see like a lot of cute things, like especially like cute trendy items that have just cycled their way into there. So you might want to have an idea like, hey, I need some turtlenecks in my wardrobe. I'm going to specifically look for turtlenecks. Or I know that mint is going to be big this spring. So I want to check my thrift stores to see if there are some mint colored items in there. And I think that the biggest thing about thrift is don't be afraid. I mean, overall, you're not going to end up spending as much money as you would in a regular retail store, right? So don't be afraid to push it. I think another thing that thrifting and secondhand shopping promotes is building relationships with other people that can maybe help you. Like I've gone to tailors to have things adjusted, or I might just take out my sewing machine and adjust something myself. If there's a garment that I see in the store that looks cute, I love the fabric, but it might not be the right fit. There's also something called thrift and flip, a whole world called thrift and flip. Whoa. Where you take something that has potential and either using your own skills with sewing, or you can take it to somebody like a tailor who does have those skills. You can ask for it to be remade and reshaped and re-envisioned into something newer and fresher than what it even was. Because another thing you'll really find in the thrift store is great material. A lot of great material. And so that's kind of what comes to my mind. It's just like, go in. If you want to know what you're looking for, that could help. If you just want to get lost, I guarantee you'll have a good time. And stick to out of major cities. I know that's another thing. Out of major cities, thrifting is in major cities, thrifting, like New York City, of course, thrifting is very, very big here. So that means you're walking into like consignments like Buffalo Exchange, L Chain, Vintage, or even the regular Goodwill, looking at like retail prices on secondhand items. And of course, I respect those vendors before the price. It's New York, and it's also like there's some of the most stylish people in the world here. So, there probably are some items that is worth a little bit more. So I think it all depends on your budget. So if you're thinking, if you have a wider budget, you're going to find some gems in big cities like New York, but you might be paying a little bit more. But I personally love finding Goodwills in small towns and suburbs. They have great stuff.
I love it. And I want to share this picture because this is what got me into the conversation with you, coming on the show and talking about your experience. So let me just show you. My cousin posts this picture on Facebook, and I'm like, whoa, this is popping, man. And she's talking about, the thrifting. And I'm like, hey, I got to have you on the show because this is the one thing that I haven't talked about much on the show is the sustainable clothing, and learning how eco-friendly it is and recycling the clothing. So I thought this was really, really important to talk to, and especially coming from you, we're not talking about celebrity. We're talking about the everyday person that's out there doing this and doing it their way to show their own uniqueness. You look really, really fabulous in this picture, and I wouldn't even imagine that it was vintage or recycled clothing. So you are doing the darn thing. You are a creative director. Let's talk about that. Okay, what is that? A creative director of what? What do you actually do as a creative director?
Yeah, so I'm a photographer and I take pictures. And sometimes when I have clients, they want more than a photographer's role, right? Or it started about a couple of years ago where they wanted me to step in and do more, right? Because for the most part, as a photographer, you could work on a team and there could be a lighting expert and a makeup artist and all of these things already in place. And so you could just be there to snap the picture. But sometimes when people want photos for, let's say, they're small businesses, who I believe small businesses are the champions of this country.
Yes, they are. Woo-hoo! Thank you for that.
And you have small businesses that have big visions, right? And it's about execution, but for them, they might not have stepped into the creative space at all. And so as a creative director, I am playing the photographer role, but I'm also taking lead on the direction and vision and surfacing that out of my clients and bringing it to life. So for example, I just worked with a family from North Carolina. Oh, both. They're from DC and North Carolina, sisters. And their daughter, the niece/daughter, just released a children's book. And they wanted to do the promo photos for it. So with them, I worked to come up with a creative storyline for the rollout, a visual story that we were telling, that told a story of freedom of expression, because that's what the books are, in line with the theme, freedom of expression and childhood innocence and playfulness. So we came up with this sleepover photo shoot theme. And in the end, we come up with photos looking like straight out of a Gap magazine. And that's
nice.
We put our heads together and we knew what we wanted and we worked together to bring it out. And so I help you bring that out, and then I help steer it. I bring in the common knowledge, I bring in the insight and the experience, and we put it together and then we execute.
I love it. I'm going to have to hire you for some projects too. What would you say is your own uniqueness in all this? What is Kierrah Smith's own uniqueness?
Wow. Well, I would say that my uniqueness is like, I think that I will push for vulnerability. Vulnerability in a way that is new and unique for even this current Kierrah compared to previous Kierrah, who is really my only competition and barometer. So I like to challenge myself to just not know anything, to come in with a fresh mind, to come in with a fresh perspective, because I know I don't know everything. And I think that it benefits me and makes me unique because there's a multitude of ways you cannot know something, right? And for everything that I don't know, I learned something that I wouldn't have known if I didn't allow myself to not know. And so I think that at least right now, that's my uniqueness, is that I will put myself out there and allow myself to be shaped and molded. But that still allows me to retain who I am inside and be true to me because of that resound commitment to being moved, being swayed, growing.
I love it. And you can only be you. I mean, the platform that I'm on and a lot of the things that I teach about people finding their vegan soul. And you know that, I've been vegan for a long time. We have vegan restaurants and vegan events. But it all boils down to who's Naijha, what's the uniqueness, why am I doing this? I'm not doing this because someone's telling me that this is all embodied in me and my spirituality and the way, I see the world. And I know you've dabbled in a little bit of plant-based lifestyle, talk to me a little bit about that experience and your thoughts around that.
Yeah, so I got into veganism, I want to say 2013. And I went through some changes throughout over the years, but one thing that veganism has taught me is like respect of body, respect of self. I think that it's one of the most enduring lessons that I've ever learned in life was when I sat back and looked at my diet and how it affected me and my body. And that is what made me a believer very, very early, because I was like, how can it not be true if I used to wake up feeling like this, but now I wake up feeling like this? And how could I ignore the correlation to how much my days go better when I'm in a clear state of mind? And so that's why I make it a priority. And I think I've also even learned even more lessons from there, because I think even in the beginning, I was a no sugar vegan. But then I still did a lot of carbs and this, that, and there. So one of the things in my journey is plants first, right? Like plants very first, and everything else second.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, we're looking at a plant forward future. And, whether you're going fully vegan, for the ethical reasons, our environmental diet, plants first, because when you eat things that are living, your body's going to feel better. Are you interested in becoming an image consultant at some point in your life, in your career? Have you thought about that?
It's so funny because I never really thought about it. I kind of did it as like a thing for me. But since I've been more public with my creations in terms of wardrobe selections, I would love the opportunity at least once to help someone. And so, yeah, I would definitely consider it if it came to me. I don't know if I'm searching for it, but if it came to me, it would be really cool.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure to connect with you, Kierrah. Thank you for so much for coming on. How can people connect with you for more ideas and tips on style, beauty, and I know you don't want to say fashion, but some people see it as fashion. Do you have a blog? And if they want to connect with you on your photography, how can people connect with you?
I have a blog on my website. It's not super active. It's mostly a picture blog, an image blog, but people can connect with me in terms of the thrift and sustainability creations that I put together on my Instagram. That's at Kierrah Jordan, Kierrah Jordan, as well as my TikTok, which is also at Kierrah Jordan. And then my website does just have all of the things that I do, and that's kierrahsmith.com.
Anything else that you want to share to the viewers or anyone that might watch the replay? Any strong messages before we close out?
I think that I would say, like, listen, if your wardrobe needs some sprucing up, don't be afraid. Step into, don't be afraid. I know some people have it on their list. I always
stop talking to me, Kierrah. You talking to me, man. I got stuff from when I lived in the Bronx back in the
so it's like, don't be afraid. Just give yourself a date one day to the thrift store and see where life takes you. I also love the home decor side of thrifting as well, which is another thing that I do too. So definitely go venture out, try something new if you haven't.
Well, I appreciate you again for coming on. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Please share, like, comment. Someone needs this information. I know I needed it today because I need to start making some moves and some changes. Thanks again for tuning in to Naijha Speaks. If you like the content, please, like I said, share, like, subscribe. And whatever you do in your life and today, be well and please be safe and do you, because that's all you can do is you. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one.